Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The year was 2148, and humanity had reached the stars. It wasn't the gleaming, utopian future we once envisioned, though. Space wasn't a sprawling metropolis of glittering towers and hover cars. No, it was brutal, unforgiving, and wild. Colonization became less about exploration and more about survival. The real prize was the untapped resources of distant planets, and to reach them, humanity had pushed the boundaries of science in ways that would have terrified our ancestors. Dr. Evelyn Marek stared out of the shuttle window, watching the rugged surface of Exara grow closer as they descended. Exara, a planet that had eluded human settlement for decades, its atmosphere too toxic, its environment too hostile. But that was before they'd cracked the code to genetic modification. Now, they were equipped for anything. Around her, the rest of the crew prepared for touchdown. Captain Jonah Reeves was in his element, directing the team with the calm authority of someone who'd led missions like this before. Reeves was the one they all relied on, the backbone of the crew, steady and sure. He was flanked by Naomi Yara, the medic responsible for keeping them alive if things went wrong, and Eli Ortiz, the engineer who'd spent more time than anyone questioning the ethics of what they were about to do. 10 minutes to surface, Reeves called out, his voice gruff but steady. Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She had led the team of scientists that had perfected the genetic modifications in every person aboard this shuttle. They were engineered to adapt to Exara's deadly atmosphere, to withstand temperatures that would cook a normal human, and to breathe air that would suffocate an unmodified person in seconds. She should feel proud, but something gnawed at her, a quiet doubt she couldn't shake. "We've got this," Reeves said, as if sensing her hesitation. "This is what we trained for." Evelyn forced a smile and nodded again. "I know, it's just. This planet has been hostile for so long. It's hard to believe we're about to conquer it." Reeves shrugged. "Adaptation. It's what humans do best." The shuttle jolted as it touched down, the hiss of the pressurization systems echoing through the cabin. The door unlatched, revealing Exara's barren, rocky landscape, illuminated by the planet's dim orange sun. The air outside shimmered with toxic gases, but the crew was unaffected. They had been built for this. One by one, they stepped onto the surface. Evelyn held her breath, despite knowing it was unnecessary. She was still adjusting to the idea that she could breathe in this hellish atmosphere, a place where any other human would have died within minutes. Eli was the first to speak. "Feels like a furnace out here," he muttered, squinting up at the sky. Naomi chuckled. "At least we won't need sunscreen." Reeves barked out a laugh and started directing the team to set up the base camp. In the distance, jagged mountains loomed, and a strange, pulsing glow radiated from the planet's crust. There were no signs of life, just endless stretches of scorched earth and toxic clouds swirling in the atmosphere. "This is it," Evelyn murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "We're the first humans to set foot on Exara." Eli, who had been quiet for most of the journey, came to stand next to her. "First and maybe the last," he said, not looking at her. "I still think this was a mistake, Doc." Evelyn frowned. "You know as well as I do that this mission is critical. We need Exara's resources. Earth can't survive without them." "I'm not talking about the mission." Eli turned to face her. "I'm talking about us." "The modifications. We've tested them," Evelyn replied, her voice tight. "We've run simulations." "Simulations aren't real life," Eli cut her off. "We've played God with our DNA." "Do you really think we can predict every outcome?" Evelyn opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. She didn't want to admit it, but Eli's concerns had been echoing in her mind for weeks. They had been so focused on success that they hadn't considered the consequences if something went wrong. And if it did, they were on their own. No rescue, no fallback plan, just survival. "Let's just focus on the task at hand," she said finally, trying to push the doubts away. Eli gave her a long look. then nodded and walked back toward the base camp. Days passed, and the crew settled into their routines. The base camp was fully operational, and their genetically enhanced bodies performed better than anyone had expected. They could endure the heat, the radiation, and even the unpredictable bursts of toxic gas from the planet's surface. Reeves took pride in their adaptability. He led the team in daily excursions, mapping the terrain and collecting samples. Naomi monitored everyone's health, reporting minor changes in physiology that seemed to enhance their performance even further. Their senses sharpened, their reflexes quickened, and their strength increased. But not everything was perfect. Eli was the first to notice the changes. It started with small things like the way some crew members began speaking less, opting for physical gestures instead. Their appetite for food dwindled, and they became fixated on the planet's energy, drawn to the glowing fissures in the ground that pulsed with a strange, rhythmic light. "I don't like it," Eli said one evening as he and Naomi sat by the campfire. "Something's off." The others, "They're acting weird." Naomi sighed. "We're on a hostile planet, Eli." "Everyone's tense." "I'm not seeing anything abnormal in their medical scans." "Maybe not yet," Eli muttered, but his unease was growing. Reeves dismissed Eli's concerns, insisting that the crew was adapting as expected. "This is what we trained for," he kept saying. But even Evelyn had started noticing the odd behavior. And then, one day, the real changes began. It was during one of their routine expeditions when things took a sharp turn. Reeves led the group toward a particularly large fissure in the ground, its glow more intense than the others. As they approached, one of the crew members, Travis, a biologist, suddenly collapsed. Naomi rushed to his side, scanning him for any sign of injury. But his vitals were off the charts. His skin was pale and clammy, his pupils dilated. "Get him back to camp," Reeves ordered, but before anyone could move, Travis convulsed violently. His muscles rippled beneath his skin, and a deep, guttural growl escaped his throat. Eli, who had been standing nearby, stepped back in horror. "What the hell?" Travis's body began to contort, bones cracking and reshaping themselves in ways that shouldn't have been possible. His fingers elongated into sharp claws, his skin thickened into a dark, leathery texture, and his eyes, once human, now glowed with an eerie, animalistic intensity. "Get back!" Reeves shouted, pulling his weapon. But it was too late. Travis lunged at them, moving with impossible speed and ferocity. Reeves fired, but the bullets seemed to do little to slow him down. It took the combined efforts of the entire crew to finally subdue him, and even then, it was only through brute force. "What the hell is happening to him?" Naomi gasped, staring down at Travis's unconscious, mutated form. Evelyn knelt beside him, her mind racing. "This shouldn't be possible. The modifications were supposed to be controlled. This is a mutation." "A mutation?" Eli's voice was thick with fear and anger. "You mean this is just the beginning?" The mutations spread rapidly. Travis was just the first. Over the next few days, more crew members began showing signs of aggression and physical changes: elongated limbs, sharp teeth, thickened skin. Communication broke down as their ability to speak deteriorated. They started moving in packs, following some primal instinct that was growing stronger with each passing day. Eli and Naomi were the only ones unaffected, along with Reeves, though even he had started to exhibit heightened aggression and erratic behavior. Evelyn spent every waking moment in her lab, trying to understand what had gone wrong. It wasn't long before she found the answer. The planet's atmosphere contained an unknown element, a compound that interacted with their genetically modified DNA, triggering uncontrollable mutations. The modifications had made them vulnerable to something they hadn't anticipated. They had become something else, something no longer human. Evelyn slumped over her console, staring at the data. The answer was right in front of her, but it didn't offer comfort. The planet, Exara, had unleashed something within their genetic code, something primal and uncontrollable. The unknown element in the air acted like a catalyst, triggering a chain reaction in the modified DNA. The crew had been designed to adapt to hostile environments, but XR had its own plans. It had transformed them, twisted them into something feral and unrecognizable. Behind her, Naomi entered the lab, her face pale with exhaustion. "We've lost two more," she whispered, not meeting Evelyn's eyes. "Rodriguez and Chen. They're completely gone." "The creatures," Evelyn finished the sentence for her, her voice hollow. "I know." Naomi stood silent, her eyes scanning the cluttered lab, full of test tubes and monitors. "Is there any way to reverse it?" "I don't think so," Evelyn said quietly. "The mutations are too far along. They're evolving into something entirely new." This wasn't supposed to happen. Naomi swallowed hard, gripping the edge of a nearby table. "Then what do we do?" "We're running out of options." Before Evelyn could respond, the door slid open, and Eli entered, his expression dark. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. Now, Evelyn and Naomi exchanged a glance before following him outside. The sun had begun to set, casting a deep red hue over the horizon. The remaining crew members said those who hadn't fully mutated yet were gathered in the distance, their movements erratic, their eyes flickering with a strange, animalistic gleam. Captain Reeves stood at the front, his hand resting on his weapon. "We can't stay here," Eli said, his voice urgent. "The others. They're getting worse. We have to leave before they turn completely. They'll kill us." Naomi shook her head. "Leave? And go where?" "The shuttle won't be ready for launch for another week. We're stuck here." "There has to be another way," Eli insisted. "We can't just wait to be hunted down." Reeves approached, his heavy boots kicking up dust as he walked. His face was drawn, his eyes bloodshot. "I'm not leaving this planet until we've completed the mission," he said, his voice hard as steel. Eli stared at him in disbelief. "Mission? Look around you, Reeves. The mission's over. The crew's gone, and this planet. It's killing us. We need to survive, not complete some doomed mission." Reeves's hand hovered near his weapon, his jaw tightening. "We signed up for this. We knew the risks." "The risks?" Eli took a step forward, his anger boiling over. "We're not even human anymore." "You think this is what we signed up for?" Evelyn watched the confrontation, her heart pounding. She could see the tension in Reeves' body, the subtle twitch in his fingers. Something was wrong with him. It was subtle, but it was through his heightened aggression, the twitch in his muscles, the way he spoke like a man teetering on the edge of control. Before Eli could say another word, Reeves drew his weapon, aiming it squarely at Eli's chest. "Stand down," he ordered, his voice sharp. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind howling across the barren landscape. Eli stood frozen, his eyes locked on Reeves. "You're sick," Eli finally said, his voice quiet but firm. "Just like the others." Reeves' hand trembled. Evelyn took a step forward, her heart racing. "Jonah," she said softly. "Put the gun down." Reeves didn't move. His eyes were wild, his breath ragged. "We finish what we started," he muttered under his breath, as if speaking to himself. Then, without warning, he swung the gun toward Evelyn. "You did this," he snarled. "You and your damn science. You turned us into monsters." Evelyn froze, staring down the barrel of the gun. Naomi took a sharp breath, stepping forward. "Jonah, don't." "She's our only chance at understanding what's happening." Reeves' finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could pull it, Eli lunged forward, knocking the gun from his hand. The two men grappled, their bodies slamming into the dusty ground as they fought for control. "Stop!" Evelyn cried, rushing forward to intervene, but Naomi held her back. "Let them settle this," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Reeves isn't thinking straight." The struggle between Eli and Reeves was fierce, but it was clear that Reeves was losing control, his body twisting unnaturally as the mutation spread through him. With a final roar, he shoved Eli aside, his face contorted into something monstrous. His muscles bulged, his eyes glowing with the same eerie light that had overtaken the others. Eli stumbled to his feet, breathing heavily. "He's gone," he whispered, backing away. "He's one of them." Reeves' transformation was complete. He stood tall, his body towering over the others, his skin thickened into a leathery hide, his fingers curling into claws. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with himself, as if some part of his humanity still lingered, but it was short-lived. With a guttural snarl, he lunged at Eli. Evelyn and Naomi screamed as Eli dodged out of the way, barely escaping the creature's grasp. Revesa, or what was left of him, turned his attention toward the base, his eyes locking on the remaining crew members. "We have to stop him," Naomi whispered, her voice trembling. "How?" Evelyn asked, panic rising in her chest. "He's too strong." Eli looked around frantically, his mind racing. "The reactor," he said suddenly. "We can overload it, blow the whole base." Evelyn stared at him in horror. "That'll kill us all." "If we don't, he'll hunt us down, one by one," Eli replied, his voice grim. "And then he'll find a way off this planet." Naomi glanced at Evelyn. "He's right. If Reeves or the others get back to Earth, it'll be a massacre. We can't let them leave." Evelyn's mind raced. Everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in, it was all unraveling before her eyes. The genetic modifications had been a mistake, a failure of unimaginable proportions. Now, the only way to fix it was to destroy everything. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll do it." Eli nodded, already moving toward the base. Naomi followed close behind, and after a moment's hesitation, Evelyn joined them. Inside the base, the atmosphere was tense. The remaining crew members were holed up in various rooms, their transformations progressing rapidly. They no longer spoke, no longer even acknowledged each other. They were creatures now, predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. Eli made his way to the reactor controls, his hands moving quickly as he began inputting commands. Evelyn watched, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew there was no going back after this. The base, the mission, the research, it would all be gone. But it had to be done. If Reeves or any of the others found a way off Xara, humanity wouldn't stand a chance. As the reactor began to overload, a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Outside, Reeves and the other mutated crew members sensed the danger. They howled in fury, their bodies convulsing as they charged toward the base. "We don't have much time," Eli said, his voice tense. "We need to get to the shuttle." The three of them raced toward the launch pad, the ground shaking beneath their feet as the reactor neared critical mass. Behind them, the creatures that had once been their comrades were closing in, their inhuman screams echoing through the night. Naomi reached the shuttle first, slamming her hand on the control panel to open the hatch. "Come on!" she yelled, waving the others inside. Eli and Evelyn scrambled up the ramp, the door sealing shut behind them just as the creatures reached the pad. Through the viewport, they could see Reeves pounding on the door, his face twisted in rage. "Launch sequence initiated," Eli said, his fingers flying over the controls. The shuttle lurched as it lifted off the ground, the creatures' howls fading into the distance as they ascended into the atmosphere. Below them, the base erupted in a blinding explosion, the shock wave rippling through the landscape. Xara's surface cracked and buckled under the force, consuming everything in its path. Evelyn watched the destruction unfold in silence, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had done. They had survived, but at what cost? As the shuttle drifted into space, Eli turned to her, his face grim. "We need to make sure this never happens again." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "We will." But as she glanced at Naomi, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A small cut on Naomi's hand, just below the surface of her skin. The dark, leathery scales had begun to form. The nightmare wasn't over.